Hello, and welcome to another session of Excel Programming for Clinicians with me, Lordson Callum. In this session, we will continue our exploration of loops by looking at the do-while loops. Specifically, we will look at the do-while loop, which lets us check a condition at the beginning of each loop and then run the loop again if that condition remains true. We will then look at the do-loop-while, which sounds similar, but which checks the condition at the end of each loop and runs the loop again if the condition remains true. I will show you the difference between these two types of do-while loops, and we will talk about when and how to use them. Okay, let's start with the do-while loop. I'll declare a variable to use as my counter. I'll set the variable equal to 16. So I want to loop from the 16th row to the 25th row. The way you declare a do-while loop is to say do-while, and then you set your condition. I want to loop while I is less than 25. I'll write some code and then I'll say loop. So this is a structure of a do-while loop. It starts with the words do-while, and then you set your condition, and then at the end you loop. The condition is checked at the beginning of each loop, and the loop runs as long as that condition remains true. Let's write some code to demonstrate. Let's get our cells object and get the ith row and fourth column. And let's set the value to some text. And then really important, as part of a do-while loop, you have to increase the value of your loop once you have completed running the code you want to run. So at the end, you need to say the new value of I is equal to whatever I was plus 1, so that I increases by 1, and then the value of I gets evaluated again at the beginning of the next loop. This step is often forgotten, and then your code runs infinitely and you don't know why it's not breaking out of the loop. So remember always to increment your variable. Let's run the code and see what we get. As you can see, when I was equal to 16, the code ran and we booked an appointment. When I was equal to 17, 18, 19, all the way to 24, the code ran and we booked an appointment. However, when I was equal to 25, the code did not run. We didn't book an appointment. And the reason for that is that the value of the I is checked at the beginning of the loop. And if that value is no longer true, here we're checking that I is less than 25. When I is equal to 25, this code doesn't run and we break out of the loop. So the do-while loop is checked at the beginning of each loop. Let's copy this code, comment it out, and let's take a look at what would happen if we set our condition I less than 16. What do you think would happen? Let's set a breakpoint and let's run the code. So the first time we run, I is equal to 16, but our condition requires that I be less than 16. So let's step through the code. We jump straight out of the loop and the code ends. So if the condition is not true on the first iteration, the code is not run. So the code for the do-while loop checks the condition at the beginning of each loop. Let's try this. Let's copy this code, comment it out, paste it below, and let's change our condition. Instead of checking I as a row value, let's check the value of the actual cell. So let's get our cells object, and we'll check the ith row and the second column. And we'll check the value. And we'll say while that value is not equal to an empty string, so as long as the value property of the cells object for cell I, column 2, so we're looping through the values of our patient ID, as long as that value is not equal to an empty string, we will book an appointment and we'll move to the next value of I. Let's run the code and see what we get. Remember, I starts off at 16. And this time, it books appointments for all of our patients. The cell I2 will be an empty string when I is equal to 26. And so when I is equal to 26, it will break out of the loop. So that's the structure of the do while loop. The most important thing to remember is that the condition is checked at the beginning of each iteration of the loop. Next, let's take a look at the do loop while. The do loop while checks the condition at the end of each loop, as we've said. Let's declare our variable. Let's set our variable again equal to 16 because we want to start from the 16th row. Where you write a do loop while is to say do, you then write your code, and then you say loop while, and you check your condition. So the structure of a do loop while is your do starts first, then you write your code, and then you loop while this condition remains true. So the code will always run the first time. And then at the end of the loop, it will check the condition. And if that condition is still true, the code will run again. So let's copy and paste from before. And this time we want to go into column 5. So now we're checking that I is less than 25. Let's run this code and see what we get. And as you can see, when I was equal to 16, it ran the code, and then at the end, it checked the condition, is I less than 25? And because that was true, it ran again when I was equal to 17. And that kept happening until I was equal to 24. It ran the code when I was equal to 24, and then it incremented I to 25, and then it checked the condition again. And because the condition was now I equal to 25, it didn't run for the 25th row. Let's set a breakpoint and see that actually in action. Let's delete our entry, and let's run the code again. So we start off with I equal to 16. We run the code and book the first appointment. We increment I to 17. We check the condition. 17 is less than 25, and so the loop runs again. And it keeps running until I equals to 24. It runs again, and it books the 24th row and increments I to 25. Now, our condition is no longer true. If we were to check this in our immediate window, we will get false. I less than 25 is now false. And so when we step through the code, we break out of the loop and we end the sub. What do you think would happen if we set our condition for I less than 16? Remember, in our do while loop, when I was less than 16, we didn't book any appointments because it just jumped out straight out of the loop. Let's copy this code. Let's paste it below, and let's check condition of I equal to 16. Let's set a breakpoint and step through the code. So the first time we run I is equal to 16, and as we step through the code, we book our first appointment, we increment the value of I to 17, we then check the condition is no longer true, and we break out of our loop. But we have booked our first appointment. So with the do loop while, the loop runs before the condition is checked, and so we do always run the code at least once. Let's copy this code, comment it out, paste it below, and let's check for our patient hospital number in our cells object, ith row, second column. Let's check the value of that. And when it's equal to an empty string, we break out of the loop. We start off with I equals 16, which will pick out the first patient in our list, and then we'll run the do loop. And then at the end of each loop, we will check the condition. Let's run the code and see what we get. And as before, we've booked appointment for all of our patients because we're checking the condition at the end of each loop. So we've just taken a quick look at the do while loop and the do loop while. The key difference between the two, as we've said, is that the do while loop checks the condition at the beginning of the loop, and so there is a chance that it will not run the code in the loop if the condition is not true. The do loop while, on the other hand, checks the condition at the end of each loop, and so it will always run the loop at least once. So you use a do loop while when you always want to run your code at least once before checking a condition. Okay, I hope that made sense and I hope you found that useful, and I will see you in the next video.